is a non-profit organization founded in 2020 by dharmic American leaders and philanthropists interested in the preservation and celebration of the philosophy, culture, and traditions of Southeast and South Asia and East Asia. DhIA aims to identify and respond to urgent needs in the community with evidence-based practices that embody secular and inclusive core values. Over the year, and some DhIA initiatives include meditation and mindfulness for stress relief. DhIA meditation teachers are from multiple meditation traditions, such as yoga and several Buddhist meditation traditions. 8-week meditation sessions were offered to healthcare workers to help them combat stress from increased COVID-related demands. Mindfulness in Action, a multi-university program, was implemented to help college students cope with stressors and explore how to carry mindfulness off the mat into their daily life. DhIA sponsored art projects, one of which incidentally is also being premiered today, the Inaugural 2021, a collaborative public art that showcases an ancient art form, kolam. And now our inaugural event, Dharma, Life Paths and Choices for Women. How dharmic values are a part of everyday life choices. So what is dharma? It can be understood as actions in following a virtuous path to promote goodness in the world for others and not limited to self-interests. It can take different forms, emphasizing various virtues such as honesty, truth, nonviolence, etc. Dharmic heritage can include religious identification, and ethnic heritage, or even cultural practices that help someone self-identify as dharmic. So as a team, as we explored how Dharma influences life paths and choices for women, we turn to research. What does research indicate about women of Dharma, and especially during COVID times? How were the lives of women impacted by COVID? We found immigration concerns, unemployment, loss of health insurance, rising mental health crisis, amidst increased incidents of domestic violence and hate violence. Many areas where many, especially women of Dharma, faced inequities and challenges. And just to ensure that we all have a similar understanding of these words, equity and equality, please take a moment to absorb the picture. If everyone was treated only equally, the problems may remain for some, as in the picture. Equity is adding whatever is needed to help someone accomplish their purpose. I have one concern with this picture, though. It suggests that there is a deficit in the smaller person, and I hesitate to use that example, especially with women. So we worked with a creative artist to design what equity means in DhIA. It is recognizing the differences that celebrate our diversity and offering thoughtful support to help everyone accomplish their purpose. In this case, a bird with a shorter beak. And the larger term, systemic equity or justice, is one day having resources available freely for all to succeed without any special intervention. So just take a moment to absorb, this is what we are here today about. We set out to create this event with 3 central messages in mind on how Dharma can be presented as an exploration of career and life choices. The 3 messages. Dharma is part of everyday life choices. Women of Dharma face inequities beyond what other women might face. DhIA Foundation's role in addressing these gaps in equity. How can we, as a caring community, develop DhIA Foundation's role in addressing these gaps? So we begin with an inaugural message from Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who is an Indian American politician serving as the U.S. representative for Washington's 7th Congressional District since 2017. She is the first Indian American woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, the district's first female member of Congress, and is also the first Asian American to represent the state of Washington at the federal level. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I request the video be played.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I'm proud to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Thank you so much for inviting me to share a few words with you today. As an immigrant woman who came to this country alone at the age of 16 and went on to become the first South Asian American woman ever elected to the U.S. House, I want to start by thanking Dharma in Action for all the incredible work you do to foster equity for women of Dharma. The notion of Dharma, of duty to community, of a soul force, as Mahatma Gandhi spoke of it, dedicated to bringing about peace, justice, and harmony in the world, this has been a central concept in my life. It's why I spent 20 years as an immigrant civil and human rights activist before coming to Congress. And it's why my work in Congress has centered on everything from universal health care through a Medicare for All system to free public colleges and universities that invest in our young people, to fairness in our tax system, to humane immigration policy that recognizes the contributions and resilience of America's critically important immigrant community from all over the world. The work before us is critically important at this moment in particular. Every one of us as women leaders in different fields can make a difference. As we see hate crimes against Asian Americans, but also so many other groups, it's incumbent on us to speak out, to take action, and to lead. And that is why what you are doing to elevate and exemplify dharmic principles and action is so critical. Each of us has the power to make a difference. We simply have to use that power to advance progress in our society, because at the core of our dharma, we understand the simple concept that we are all better off when we're all better off. So thank you again for your leadership and for all of the efforts that each and every one of you are making to make the world a better place. Keep up the good work, and know that I will always be organizing right alongside you.
Thank you. And so now we begin our discussions, talking amongst one another, and more important, listening to each other's experience. I'm delighted to invite Nirupama Raghavan to please take over from me as the host for the next segment of panel Career Growth Panel. Niru?
Thank you, Aparna. Hi, everyone. My name is Nirupama Raghavan. I'm a strategy consultant at IBM, and I'm one of the board members of DhIA. Congresswoman Jayapal talked about the connection between dharmic values and her career in activism, and I think this is a very fascinating topic. Our beliefs play such a key role in our lives and our life choices. And for many of us, our career plays a big role in our life and our identity. So we thought it would be interesting to talk to a few women and understand about how their dharmic beliefs and values have influenced their career choices and the decisions they've made along the way. We have an amazing group of women with us today, and I'll ask for them to turn on their video at this point. We have a tax lawyer / wellness entrepreneur, a professor, a leader in healthcare, and an environmental scientist. So, this is a very diverse group of women, and we think it's likely that they might each interpret the concept of Dharma a little differently. So I'm going to ask them to go one by one and introduce themselves. And when they introduce themselves, I'm going to ask them, what is your Dharma? talk to us a little bit about that so we understand where each one of us is coming from. So we'll start with Anya. If you could kick it off, that would be great.
Thank you, Niru. Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Anya Iyengar, and I am a resident of San Jose, California. Lived there most of my life, actually, and I currently am a professor of communication studies here in San Jose. I would say that my Dharma is very much like what Aparna mentioned earlier on, which is to be kind to people. I think our world has become increasingly very cruel. When I say our world, I mean human beings as a whole, and it's made me extremely sad for humanity. And as a result, I do the little things that I can do to be kind to all living creatures, not just human beings, but everyone. I recently became vegan. I've been vegetarian for a long time, but I've become vegan as well. And that's hard to do. Those of Indians, we know that, especially South Indians, we know how hard that is to do. We love our yogurt. But I've done it, and I have no regrets about it. So I would say my Dharma is to be kind to all living creatures. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. That's a great way to kick it off. Sri Lekha, if you could go next.
Thank you first to DhIA Foundation. Namaste to all for giving this opportunity. I am Sri Lekha Pale. I'm a healthcare professional in Northern Virginia area. And currently I'm actually running a COVID facility where we are doing massive vaccinations. And my way of leading Dharma, I am totally cognizant of the fact that everyone has our way of defining Dharma, but I purely define Dharma by way of Sanskrit term. Sanskrit term comes from word DhRI, which means that upholds, that without which nothing can stand, that with which maintains stability and harmony, which means that I like to encompass my life with conduct, duty, right, justice, virtue, and morality. I know those sounds like a handful of words, but I also would like to say that that is ultimately about leading a righteous life, leading a righteous life by what my karma bhumi has been teaching me, by what my matru bhumi has taught me, by being patient. Our ancient sage Manu, he prescribed 10 essential rules. So there is really no need for any one of us to reinvent the wheel, I say. I like to forgive. I like to live by self-control. And for just kind of conclude this, for talking about the COVID, it's like I'm a healthcare professional. I could go about doing my own things, but I was given this opportunity to run a COVID facility, and I felt it was my dharma to kind of let go of my comfort zone and get out of my comfort zone and run this, because this is what is needed at this point of life, because people are suffering. So to come out of our comfort zone and do what is needed in the greater good of our community is leading dharmic principles. And that's what I think we all need to be doing.
Thank you so much, Sri Lekha. That is a wonderful description. And already we're seeing the influence of Dharma in people's choices. So great conversation already. Rohini, if you could go next, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohini Vembar. I'm an environmental scientist currently in Cincinnati, working for a civil engineering firm. I actually recently graduated from Ohio State University, so I'm very early on in my career. I would consider my Dharma to be much like Anya, to be respectful and cognizant of other people, but not just stopping at that, respecting the natural environment. So all animals, all plants, realize that everyone and everything has their own stuff going on, and kind of taking that into account when you make your choices.
Thank you, Rohini. And it's great to see, no matter what stage you are in life, Dharma has application, and people are really thinking about how it impacts and influences their life and choices. Suma, if you could round this out.
Yeah, sure. My name is Suma Mudan. I live in Houston, Texas. And what's my current role? My current role is to encompass anything that has to do with wellness, and that may include teaching yoga or using other modalities to bring everything together, body, mind, and soul. What is my dharma? So dharma can be interpreted like Sri Lekha said, in the purest sense, or the colloquial sense is dharma is always translated as duty. Duty to oneself, duty to family, duty to community. And I feel that if we bring ourselves up to our full potential, and if we are happy, we have, like, knowingly or unknowingly, we will impact everybody around us with that glow. And that is my dharma. My dharma is to follow my passion, my heart, and reach out to people and help them come out of their misery and help them surpass their pain. That's my dharma.
Thank you so much. A wonderful description. And all of these really resonated for me. For me, my dharma is about putting more good into the world than I extract. And I think elements of everything that you all said really fit into that general umbrella. So thank you very much. So now we're going to get more specific and talk about careers and career choices. And Suma, we'll start with you this time. Can you tell us about your career so far and the key choices you've made in that career and how you believe dharmic philosophies or beliefs have impacted those choices that you've made?
Yeah, sure. When I came to this country some 28 years back, I was a corporate lawyer in India, and I was a stockbroker. And then I happened to come here for various reasons, and I decided to go back to law school. And I did CPA and Masters in Law. So I started my career here in this country as a international tax consultant. I worked for several big 5 companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte and Touche. And so I suddenly don't see myself on screen. So I was like, I paused for a second, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. So after that, like, I decided to hang my shingle. And that was a very difficult decision because I was part of the World Trade Center when it collapsed. I was in the building. And I lost my job after a year of struggle, because the economy tanked in New York City. And then I decided to go into private consulting. And that was a very, very tough time to be in that space. But I hung on for a year. Then I landed my first big Fortune 500 client, and rest is history. I was a very successful consultant. But then in 2014, I decided to quit. So that was very, very tough, because to say no to a boatload of money and to pick up something that pays me nothing, like teaching yoga, that was a very big decision. And luckily, my husband was with me, and he said, life is not worth it. And the World Trade Center trauma always helps us to put things in perspective. So I decided to do that, and I am the happiest person. I still get the question, oh, why did you leave that lucrative practice? Or how can you say, why you should have done this on the side, but I'm happy that I'm doing it full time.
Yeah, clearly it's a better choice for you, for your body, mind, and soul, and your whole being in here. Now, you're also a landscape designer as well. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
So that's another of my passions, among many. And I always gardened. And when I quit my law practice, I decided to go back to Texas A&M. And there is a saying that Indians never, they have this zeal or whatever, the need to go and study more and more and more. So I went back and got 2 more qualifications as a master gardener and a landscape designer. And one of my friends asked me to design her new house, and that's how my business started. And I was the only Indian landscaper that I know. And it gave me a lot of pleasure, because landscaping, bringing gardens to life, is a therapy. And my clients, when they see their garden and when they see their blooms, and they're so happy, even to grow your own food and just go into the garden and satisfy your family's needs, that's a great thing. And I have been doing that for the last 6 years, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful story there. So Anya, we'll ask you the same question about your career choices.
Thank you, Neer. First off, I wish Suma lived nearer to me, because I need help in my garden very badly. But I started off in banking. That was my foray into the business world after I graduated college. And I was making decent money. on a superficial level, I was being satisfied by everything. I had my beautiful parking space. I had my nice desk. I, got to rub shoulders with people who had rubbed shoulders with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs in the Silicon Valley, working in the Silicon Valley. But on a soul level, I was very dissatisfied. And I knew this because one day when I was sitting in my beautiful parking space, parking my car, looking at all the trees, looking at this beautiful towering building, I did not want to get out of my car. And that told me that I was not happy where I was. As much as I was being fulfilled on the superficial level, I was getting the beautiful paycheck. We were able to pay for a nice home and whatnot. I wasn't satisfied inside. And I went home, did a lot of soul searching. That fall, I had my first child, and I made a decision then and there, not to go back. And as Suma said, I did exactly what you did. I didn't study landscaping, but I did go back and study. I went back to university and got my master's degree in communication studies, and have been teaching ever since. And I feel, obviously I'm not making the same level of money that I was making before, but it does not even matter because I'm so much more fulfilled. Being able to shape the minds of our younger generation. And it's taught me patience. Oh my goodness, has it taught me patience? I thought I was a patient person before, but oh my Lord, when you have to answer the same question 15 times, you really learn about patience. And I am happy that I've been able to learn that, because you need patience, and it's a good thing to have patience and kindness, and being able to impart whatever wisdom you have. And we all have some level of wisdom. So that's been my career path thus far.
Thank you, Anya. That's a wonderful story. Rohini, if you're at a different stage of your career, but we'd love to hear about your choices, about how you selected that, and what you're experiencing so far.
Yeah, and as a self-proclaimed young person, I thank you, Anya. I know I'm not your student, but on behalf of all students, we really appreciate all professors and everything. We couldn't really do anything without any of you. But like you said, I am at a very different stage of my life. I mentioned that I recently graduated from Ohio State University. And my parents brought me up with the belief that as long as I'm not hurting anyone, I should be able to do what it is that I really enjoy. And for me, that was working out in nature. I could never picture myself working at a desk job or anything. And so I went into Ohio State wanting to study environmental science, somehow stuck with it for all 4 years. Managed to land a really good internship with the Ohio Department of Transportation. And now 2 years, just a little under 2 years after graduating, I am an environmental scientist at Stantec Consulting. It's not a dream job, and I definitely has opened my eyes to the world of consulting, and maybe has taught me that it's not for everyone, but it is a start, I would say, to my career. It's made me realize that I do want to go back to school, get my master's, perhaps get my PhD. But I know that I am working in the field that I absolutely love. And it was always a little difficult because the Ohio State is by no means a small school, but the School of Environment is, I would say, just from my experience, one of the least diverse schools at Ohio State. There were very few people of South Asian descent and even fewer women. I would say I was probably the only undergraduate Indian American woman in my class. But even though I was pretty much the only one that I could really truly identify with, like there wasn't really anyone who could help me with personal issues or anything. But I managed to stick with it because I knew that this was what I loved. And even though not a lot of Indian women go into environmental science or landscape design, it really fulfills me, and I really enjoy the path that I am on, and I can't wait to see how I progress.
Great, thank you so much, Ernie. And I'll say, if there are not a lot of South Asian women going into environmental science, that should change, because we expect that that career field to really boom in the next few years. You know, certainly in my job, that's something we're very much looking at. So,
and I absolutely hope that I can be a role model for the people that are interested in environmental science or any similar fields.
Well, I think you already are, so that's wonderful. So let's switch over to Sri Lanka, and if you could tell us about your career choices.
Absolutely, Niru. First thing, I'm inspired by my fellow ladies right here. I haven't made any drastic career changes, I must admit. I always felt that healthcare was in my blood, and I just enjoyed my career. But I will tell you what changes I made in my clinical career. I came to United States with bachelor's in physical therapy, and I thought that was my love. I loved being a clinician, went to Boston University to pursue my doctorate in clinicals again. I started working as a clinician full-time, but during full-time work as a clinician, it didn't take me way too long. It just only took me a couple of years to realize that I'm a person that likes to get my hands dirty, if I may say. If any processes don't look good, I like to fix them. And I'm not somebody that would like to play a victim's role. I like to work for the greater good of the community. And I like to serve in my professional and in the best interest of the patient. So just to elaborate on that, on my dharmic principles, I'll keep going back to my dharmic principles. One of the things I learned while pursuing my dharmic principles is the constant learning of knowledge, right? Vidya is what I learned as my pursuit of dharmic principle, gaining skills and significantly adding to the ability to offer value through evidence-based practices and contributing that value to the greater good of the community. So I decided to move into management career very earlier on because I wanted to fix those gaps in healthcare sector. I'll go back to what Aparna ji said in the beginning. Healthcare equity became extremely apparent to me. So through my dharmic principles, I served as a vice president of South Asian Public Health Association, where I focused on promoting the health and well-being of South Asian communities through advocacy, collaboration, and communication. Again, it was at a volunteer capacity where we realized the healthcare equity issues that we really wanted to fix. And through that, I also established a home healthcare agency focusing just on South Asian community, because while you're in management, you start realizing that once patients get discharged, you have a good healthcare insurance, you get good home after discharge program. But if you are someone that struggles not having insurance or struggles with linguistic capabilities issues, then you are not at luck. So to fix those issues, I serve South Asian communities. Again, I go back to more than my accomplishment as a healthcare professional. I go back to what I learned through my dharmic principles. My dharmic principles always serve that if this is your capability, what are you doing to serve the greater good of the community? If you realize equity is an issue, what are you doing about it? If you feel like you're capable of doing this, how are you serving the community? So throughout my term, I'll go back to the verse in manuscript. An ancient Sanskrit legal text states that Dharma preserves those who serve Dharma, who preserve Dharma. And I strongly believe that. I feel that if I do something to preserve my Dharma, that Dharma will preserve me, my family, my community, and my country. So that's just how I have led my life, and that's just how I lead my career as well.
Yeah, so wonderful. And on behalf of all of us in the community who are, here during this pandemic, really appreciate the service that you're bringing in the healthcare industry. So I have a follow-up question for you. So you and I have something in common. We've both been very actively involved in Hindu temples. I was on the board of the Hindu temple in Northwest Arkansas, and I was fortunate to be on the board while we were constructing the temple, and I got to be part of that. And you were actively involved in the Durga temple here in the DC area. Can you talk a little bit about balancing your day job with your other job at the temple?
So one thing that I say while I was the president of the Durga temple is, as much as we all get into their wanting to bigger and better things, it is extremely challenging for working women, because then we get very focused on operational issue. So anyone that wants to play an executive role in Durga temple or any other temple for that matter, I say go beyond operational and have a vision. You don't have to feed million people or feed hungry or solve hungry, but just go with 2 or 3 visionary things. I think I entered into Durga temple obviously not wanting to focus just purely on operational things, but want to really focus on younger generations, like Rohini, like wanting to bring in more Rohinis into our field, bring in more Rohinis into our temple environment. And I went in wanting to make sure our older grandmas and grandpas being more involved, because they have wealth of knowledge that I feel like we don't incorporate into younger generations. I think we kind of lose them right there, and they have so much power and knowledge to incorporate. I went into temple wanting to do a lot more with interfaith activities, because I think that's where we are not really focused on, and that's what we need to do in order to promote our religious tolerance. I feel like as a temple, anybody that wants to serve in the temple, don't get involved so much into operations. Operations are important because that's the bread and butter. You have to still pay your utilities and pay temple priests and make sure managers are happy, contented, engaged. And we have to keep our devotees coming. But let's not forget why the temple exists. The institution of temple exists. I think that's where the focus should be for executives and board of trustees and board of directors.
No, that's really fascinating. I love how your vision is very consistent with your overall beliefs. And you were able to elevate out of the day-to-day, which is very hard when you're running a big organization like that with lots of devotees and lots of volunteers and lots of employees as well.
If I may, I won't take too long, but I would have to commend Shiva Vishnu Temple. I think one of the things Shiva Vishnu Temple does very well is volunteer engagement. I think they empower, engage, and give leadership roles to volunteers. And that's why it's able to accomplish what they're able to accomplish. And we need more of those.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think part of the success is tapping into a deep understanding of how Dharma and community service are very, very much aligned, and tapping into that need and belief that a lot of the volunteers have. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So now, we can mix it up a little bit here, and I'll invite any of the panelists who have passion on this topic to speak up first. But we want to talk about difficult decisions and how Dharma and your belief systems help you focus your mind and get you through the difficult decisions. Is there anyone who has a desire to start first? If not, I can call on one of the panelists.
I can start.
Okay, go ahead, Rani.
Yeah, I mentioned that my parents, they wanted me to do what makes me happy. It was a little difficult though, because they're both engineers. So I always had the idea that they wanted me to go into engineering, that if I didn't go into engineering, that they would be disappointed. And I'm sure they're on here laughing, muted, but it was really my love of nature and my love of all beings pretty much that inspired me to go into the field of environmental science. And it wasn't even, my parents were engineers, but it was my dad's father actually, who was also a botanist. So I felt like it was a little bit in my blood to go into environmental science, specifically plant ecology. So it was difficult because I thought I was disappointing them. And then I knew that they specifically wanted me to do what makes me happy. And I feel like I am making things better for both society and for the environment. That's one of our biggest challenges in my field. We have to make both the community happy, but also people who want to protect the environment happy. So it's about finding that balance. And again, that's like going back to how I define my Dharma, having respect for all beings, pretty much, listening to everyone, listening to all sides pretty much. You'll have people yelling at you, but also you'll have people supporting you. So it can be difficult, I would say, but I know that I'm making the world a better place.
No, excellent. I think that's a really great message for everyone involved, regardless of age. Sometimes you have to follow your passion, regardless of what you perceive other people may expect of you. So really kudos to you for doing that. Who would like to go next?
So in my case, I had the great fortune of having a guiding light all my life, Swami Dayananda Saraswati. So he was and he is still a very big influence on my life, my personal or communal life, because I have gone through a lot of ups and downs in my, both like personal immigration career, like you can mention anything. I have had a lot of ups and downs, but Swamiji was always there guiding me. And you cannot ask for better dharmic pillar behind you when you have to make these decisions. One of my personal difficult decision was getting remarried. It's nothing to do with career, but it also influenced my career rest of my life. So I was single for many, many years. And after World Trade Center, since the life, like I was cruelly exposed to the temporariness of life. And my current husband, he has proposed to me a long time back, and I was dilly-dallying. And I said, I went to Swamiji and asked, and he said, like, are you, if what is stopping you? So then we got married, and that was one of the best decisions. If I was afraid to lose my freedom, I was afraid to lose my freedom because I was so free. I was on my own, and I didn't want to lose my freedom. But then once I got married, I understood that it's not like individual freedom. It's a friendship that is with you to help you rest of your life. So that was a difficult decision, which worked out in my favor. And of course, the second one I mentioned, leaving a lucrative career and pursuing something that my heart craved for, to reach out and touch people's life. I volunteered in a suicide prevention society back in India. That's what actually brought me to UK for the international conference. It's called Samaritans International. And then my other passion is rescuing dogs. I have 2 rescue dogs, and my heart always goes out, and my dream is one day to establish a sanctuary for all these dogs that nobody wants. And so all these things have dharma in the background. And I'm not a temple person as such, but I'm very spiritual in the sense that I grew up with Swamiji, and he's with me always.
Wonderful, wonderful story. Anya, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I was looking for the mute button. First off, I just want to commend both of, all the panelists. Ro, I'm so proud of you for what you're doing and being a role model and doing all you're doing for the environment. God bless you for that. And Suma, I teared up a little bit when I was listening to your story, because it's a little bit like mine, kind of. You sound kind of like my long lost soul sister in some ways, because I'm like that too. 2 difficult decisions I've had to make. I mentioned to you that I started my career in banking, and I would say for Silicon Valley, it was a pretty lucrative career. We shortly after, actually during that time, we bought a house. My husband and I bought our first house together. And it's no secret that life in Silicon Valley is very expensive, extremely expensive. And so when I had my baby, I decided I didn't want to go back to work. And that was not a decision that sat well with some members of the family. It was just we were going to take a financial hit, which we did. But I could not look at that little face that I had helped to create and just viably just leave him at home or leave him with relatives and go back to a job that I wasn't 100% sure I was on board with anymore. So I made the decision to stay home with him. Again, it wasn't a completely universally accepted decision, but it was something that I dharmically knew I had to do. I had to do this because I couldn't sleep at night thinking about leaving him. So I did that. And yeah, we struggled for a while. We did struggle. But I can't say that I have any regrets about it. I look at my child now, he's grown up, he's in dental school. And, you know, I know that his decisions, his choices, his personality has largely been shaped by my being with him every step of the way. And my younger son too, I should give, you know, kudos to my younger son too. But that's one decision, one choice, one important decision that I made. A second one, and again, this is where, Suma, I kind of felt so much about for you. I was in a marriage that was not working. And it was very painful. I mean, those of us in the South Asian community, we know how stigmatized it is to not, you know, to get a divorce, to move on. And I made that decision. I made that decision because it was just too hard. And, you know, I feel more whole now as a human being. I feel whole as a person. I go out into my garden that needs a lot of help, Suma, just saying. I go out into my little itty bitty garden and I feel at peace among the life that's there. I feel at peace among the dogs that I see. You know, I want to also harbor dogs and do things like that. So making that decision of leaving my stable married life for a life that was unknown was very difficult, but it was dharmically something I had to do. I had to do it because I was not at peace. I was never at peace. And now I am.
Anya, thank you so much. And thank you both of you guys, actually all three of you, for your vulnerability on this. Really appreciate it. Sri Lekha, anything that you would like to share?
So Neera, I'm going to just sum up. I think I totally admire ladies coming, being so very transparent. I have a very similar experience as Anya. In the span of 10 years, in my first 10 years of my career, I grew from a staff position to an executive director position. But I also realized that came with a lot of responsibilities to an extent that I had to have my daughter in India on and off with my parents for the first 4 years of her life. Then came a day when she was returning back to US for good, because she needed to get into kindergarten. And I got on 495, who lives in Northern Virginia, knows the crazy traffic, to go to airport to pick her up, only to realize Medicare surveyor came in and the building had called me asking me to come back to the facility campus. And there came my reality check. I really didn't, I turned back, then couldn't go to the airport. My husband alone picked my daughter. And that's where I believe I had to take a step back and understand, do I really need this job when my daughter is 4 years old or going into kindergarten? Do I really need a position that requires me to travel so much that I can't have my daughter closer to me or I can't be involved? So that's when I took a manager position very close to home. It was kind of devastating. I'm a very career-oriented person. I push myself beyond belief. At least I used to push myself. So it was a very painful thing, but I did what I have to do. But I couldn't have been happier in the next decade of my life. I realized that dharma is what keeps our world in balance. And it is also what we must do as human beings to keep our world in balance. And that's precisely why I keep going back to not religion, but going back to dharma and saying, be truthful to yourself and my capabilities, my family balance. And also I have very diverse interests. I love politics, being more involved in kids' schools, taking leadership roles, and being very committed to the leadership roles that I hold on to, and have multiple diverse interests to serve the communities. And we all don't have 24 hours. We also need to sleep, eat, and be balanced. So it just really helps to take a step back and follow our dharmic path and step down sometimes, just like all the ladies have kind of realized. I think that's one thing that I feel that my dharma has taught me, that keep our world in balance, and that's what we must do to keep our world in balance as well.
Okay, that is a really wonderful summary of the difficult decisions and how difficult decisions sometimes lead to the best times ever. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're about out of time, but I want to give everyone like a parting shot, one final short words of wisdom for other people out there. Suma, I think you raised your hand. You can go first, but I think you're muted. Can you unmute? You need to unmute.
So I want to touch upon something that's also very close to my heart because of my personal experiences. Like, what is my advice to other women? This impacts their career. I got involved with Sakhi, Maitri, all this DhIA in Houston. These are organizations for Southeast Asian women for domestic abuse. So I see lot of women going through very, very difficult experiences in their domestic front and afraid of leaving that nest. And that is pulling them down. So don't be afraid. Take that bold step. Get rid of things that are not serving you. Get out and make your life and make your career and contribute to society in your own little way. That will give you fulfillment. Please don't stay in abusive relationships. That's my message.
Okay, great. Rohini?
Yeah, well, first I would like to say that I'm incredibly inspired by everyone who's on this panel with me. And I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences. As someone who's at the very beginning, not just her career, but I feel like life in general, I haven't really experienced much of it yet. I realize that to make yourself happy, to push yourself in the right direction, you sometimes have to take that leap. That seems incredibly scary. And, you know, if sometimes you think like, if it doesn't work out, then like, what have I done? But it seems like almost always that step, that leap is the best thing that you could have ever done. And I think that's something that everyone on this, everyone that's watching this panel right now, whether you're a woman or not, I mean, don't be afraid to take that leap. That's what's going to push you in the right direction.
Thank you. And I think we're out of time, unfortunately, for a panel. So I'll ask Anya and Srilekha to share their parting thoughts via the chat function or the Q&A function. And you have the ability to broadcast to all the attendees. So I'd just like to thank all the panelists here today. I really appreciate how honest and open and vulnerable you were in sharing your choices. And it's interesting because we talked about parents and other families, scriptures, gurus, self as motivators and drivers of Dharma. And it's been interesting to see how that's influenced you in different ways, coming from similar background, similar belief structure, but different life path choices. Really appreciate you doing that. I'm going to ask you to stay on as long as you can and continue to answer via the chat. And if you can stay towards the very end of the event as well, we'll have more of a live Q&A for anyone who chooses to stay on. I'm going to transition it now over to Nithya Nagarajan to talk with a couple of entrepreneurs about their paths. Thank you again so much for participating. Really appreciate it.
So good morning, everybody. That was an absolutely wonderful panel on women and different career paths. While we're waiting for the entrepreneurship panel to start, I encourage everybody to continue asking your questions and kind of continue to communicate via both the Q&A and chat sessions. So I would kindly request Amita, Jane, and Dali Oberoi to put on both your audio and video now. So fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining our panel on the value-based entrepreneurship. I'm Nithya Nagarajan. I'm a board member of DhIA and currently the treasurer of the organization. Today, I'll be discussing value-based entrepreneurship with Amita Jain, who is the founder of Vedic Health, which offers affordable alternative healthcare to the community. And with me also is Dali Oberoi, the founder and owner of C2 Technologies, a leader in education and online learning. Welcome, Amita and Dali. As an introduction, could you please both briefly describe and tell everybody a little bit about yourselves? Amita, I'll have you go first.
Yes, sure. Well, namaste to everyone here and to all the viewers. It's It's so nice to be a part of this memorable event. My name is Amita Jain, and I'm a doctor of Ayurveda and a longtime yoga teacher. As you said, Nitya, I have founded Vedic Health Ayurveda, which is basically a resource and a place to go for those people who have been suffering from chronic illness for unknown reasons, for length of time, and have been unable to get accurate care from the Western medical system. So Vedic Health uses the Eastern methodology of holistic care and the principles of Ayurveda to help people heal naturally from chronic illness. My background originally was in systems engineering from University of Virginia. I then went on to work in the corporate world for 10 years and then joined our family business where I co-owned and ran Classic Homes of Maryland for many years. And then faced with the decision to follow my the dharmic path that was in front of me that led me to what I'm doing today.
Dolly?
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here in the company of wonderful women. I am Dolly Oberoi. I'm the founder and CEO of C-Square Technologies, a company that is focused on online learning and education. And I'm so glad that people have learned about it now because we've been in this business for 3 decades. And one of the things that we do is actually pro bono work with K through 12 in India, and also work with the Defense Department and the government in and private sectors in the United States.
Well, that's fascinating. I'd like to kind of open the session by talking, kind of learning a little bit more about what prompted you to start this type of enterprise, because it's not easy to transition from a regular corporate or even other environment to becoming the founder and the CEO of an organization. And Dolly, I'll have you go first, and then we can switch over to Amita.
Okay, well, the last panel talked a lot about career paths and dharma and all of that. I grew up in a family where education, like many other, all the Indians that I know of, education is, worshipped, and is knowledge is power. So my mother came as a refugee from Pakistan. She was 13. She wanted to become a doctor, but there were no colleges that would take women. So she went to a college in a small town and got her undergrad degree. It was a men's college. She was covered up from head to toe and escorted by my grandmother and taken to college for 3 years. So when she got married and moved to Delhi, she found that there were lots of refugee developments coming up, but no schools. So she started the first schools in the west part of Delhi for the first generation of learners. So I think that became our family's religion at that point, education for the first generation, and it changing the this economic life and social life of the people. So I grew up in that environment and served the school as I was growing up along with my siblings, because my mother engaged us in her enterprise. And then when I graduated from my master's program, I taught at my mom's school. And one of the learnings I had was, of course, our dharma guides us, right? So let your life speak, the whole Hindu philosophy, and follow the path of service, not fruits. So as I was not just a teacher, I was doing everything for these children, because once they came to my mother built a beautiful facility, 4-acre school, but these children were living in the slums and shacks and didn't really have housing. So here I was trying to teach them all kinds of subjects, physics and geography and social sciences, and they couldn't understand anything. They couldn't relate to anything. So after 2 years of doing that, I said to my family, I said, I think we need to get education technology. And they said, you know what that is? I said, no, I don't know. I've never seen a computer, but I think computers can solve our problem for mass education in India. And the INSAT 1B satellite had just been launched, and they were using it for education. So I said, maybe we can connect up the computers with the satellites and the television. I had this weird, crazy ideas. And since I lived with my family, I had saved up my money. I bought a ticket and I said, I'm going around the world to explore how we can bring education, mass education through technology to our country. And my family was very nervous. You can imagine a girl in her early 20s, not married, traveling somewhere. That was a whole different issue in itself. So I came with a backpack and $200 and I started traveling. And when I ended up in Boston, I went to somebody asked me, a friend asked, what are you here for? And I said, I want to see computers and what they can do for education. And this friend of ours, he had just got a job at Tufts as a professor. He said, funny you should say, I have a friend at MIT, I can take you there. And he took me for a demo, and that was then I called my parents and said, not coming back. I'm going to get another master's. That somebody in the previous session said, we have an obsession with getting more degrees. So I got a master's degree in education technology. It was a joint Harvard MIT program. It was so early that even they didn't know what programs to offer. So when I went back I kept going back to India to transfer technology, but India was not ready. My mother kept sending me back to America because she said, you'll forget everything you've learned unless you practice it. I come back here and nobody's ready. And so there's only one silver lining of COVID in my mind, one of a few, is that online learning is now is actually a thing. So I had to create my own job, and because I couldn't explain to anybody what I could do, nobody would understand. So that led to the creation of my consulting practice. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like I could make a difference, but I can't tell anybody how I can do it. So I moved to Washington from Boston and started helping somebody said Department of Defense is mission focused and they need all the technology they can get because they're in a distributed environment. So I started doing efficacy studies for them. And after a few years of doing that, we started developing solutions, and that's the genesis of the company.
That is absolutely fantastic. And one of the key points is, yes, without companies and thoughts like yours years ago, none of our kids would be able to study online right now in these past 14 months. And it's just what you said right now, like hits home, and how your kind of need to give back to the community has helped not only children in India, but also here now with all this technology. Amita, I'm going to ask you the same question. What prompted you to start your enterprise, and how did your dharmic principles or background help you kind of shift from a for-profit environment to what your kind of community health business that you're operating right now? We'd love to hear that story.
Sure, thank you. Well, I was born and raised in the US. And at the age of 16, I began asking many questions like, who am I, and what is my identity? What is my purpose in life? Where I grew up, there were no other Indians. It was just black, white, and me. This led me into greater studies, and I picked up my father's Gita and I began reading Gita at that age, and that led me to our other books from our gurus and swamis and the Vedas and Upanishads, and trips to India to ask these questions. And so that led me to studies in yoga, Raj Yoga, and also to Ayurvedic medicine. But when it came time for college, I wasn't given the choice to go study Ayurvedic medicine. My father is an engineer, and his father, and so on. So I pursued that degree. But they also said that, hey, when you finish your engineering degree, you can go do whatever you want. So I finished the degree. I then moved to residential ashram, a course at an ashram in Bangalore, Swami Vivekananda Yoga Kendra, and I was 23 at that time. And I think that shaped so much of my outlook and the decisions that I would eventually make later in life. So I began the yoga studies, and I started teaching from there. I also began my studies in Ayurveda. So after my corporate job, I joined the family business. As I mentioned, my husband and I running classic homes for many years. And what happened over time is more and more questions as to, am I really following the dharmic path? And I, of course, I implemented Dharma even in that work as to seeing every client as divine. But there was still a feeling in me that of question. Is this what I am supposed to be doing? Is this what the Creator has intended for me to do? So at that moment, through my studies, religious studies and spiritual pursuits, I decided that I was just going to surrender. And I was going to see every action and every experience that would happen as the hand of the divine. Mm-hmm. So I did that. And in order to do that, I had to set aside my raga dvesha. I had to set aside my personal likes and dislikes, my personal wants, and just see that every decision I had to make was given from the divine. So as I started to do that and I opened my eyes, it was like somebody gave me glasses and I could finally see the path that was truly laid out in front of me. And as working at my job, I started getting more and more calls from people who needing help for chronic illness. At one point, there was a man that came to me who was suffering from cancer. He was 65 years old. And I remember this was several years ago. He came to my house and sat with me. We had tea, and I guided him on what to do holistically for his treatment. And this was, coupled with allopathic as well. But 6 months later, he came back to me with his lab reports. His cancer had completely gone. And he said that he not only had healed from the cancer, but he had never felt as vibrant and as energetic in his entire life. But he looked at me, asked me one question. He said, Amita, why are you not doing this for more people? Mm-hmm. And that was a question I really had to really think about, why? Why am I not doing this for more people? Is it family pressure? Is it expectations? So I was faced with a decision, and I had to say to my husband, to my father, that who groomed me to do this business with him, that I have to follow the dharmic path. And ultimately, I felt that it wasn't a decision that I was making. I was just following what was given to me. Mm-hmm. I was just following what the divine had placed in front of me to do. And after I made that change, I never looked back, and I never questioned whether what I was doing was the right thing to do. There was no question in my mind. It was just what I had to do. So that led me into ultimately making the choice to full-time, to give up my salary, to take early retirement, and just help the community to heal from illness.
Wow, that's an absolutely fascinating story. But I'm gonna flip the question now, because I'm sure for both of you, just like any entrepreneur, I'm sure you've faced a point where things were not going well with any new venture that you started, and you have stumbles. What in your dharmic background helped you plow through those stumbles? And can you expand upon how your dharmic principles kind of helped you get through those sometimes debilitating and crushing defeats you have when you start new enterprises? I'll switch it back to Dolly to go first, and then we can come back to Amita.
Thank you so much. I think I want to say that my entrepreneurial journey started the day I made that call to my parents and said, I'm not coming back. And I had no money. I didn't know, I had some college friends who were also students, so I didn't have any support systems here. And I have to say, for a person who was so timid and never wanted to ever leave Delhi, I'm here in a foreign country trying to figure out what to do with myself, how to raise capital for my education, for my living expenses and all of that. I have to say that was the most frightening time of my life. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't have a very strong faith and see my family members struggle through very difficult periods post-partition, because they were all displaced. There were a lot of widows in our family. A lot of children got lost in the transition. So I saw a lot of hardship in our family. And one thing that got all of us through was our faith. And my mother, particularly my grandmother, my father, all of them said, follow the path of service. Follow the path, follow your heart, follow your mind, and not look for the fruits. Because if you focus on the fruits, you're never going to focus on solving the problem through your dharmic principles. And I have to say that I believe in the power of prayer a lot.
Mhm.
And I think whether it is happenstance or what it is, it has worked for me personally because it gives me a lot of strength. And so I got through that period, keeping the end in mind and staying focused, number one. Number two, as in any business, there are ups and downs. Last year was a very difficult year.
Mhm.
So if you asked me on the 25th of February, I say that date very deliberately because we made a lot of key decisions that day. And so the 25th of February, when the world was still wondering, especially in the US, we were still wondering what's going on. We didn't have testing. We didn't know, is it real? Is it a hoax? Is it whatever it is? Well, I had already gotten sick for 7 weeks. And now the doctors think that was COVID, but there was no testing. I went to multiple doctors. They thought I had a virus, but
Mhm.
that's about it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't, so all the symptoms were the same. So that's what led to, at that point, I thought only one of two things: I'm going to die of the virus, or I'm going to plan ahead in case I die of the virus. So we made a lot of decisions that day, and it was very scary time for the business, because we had to do serious financial modeling. We had to figure out, what do we do with our 500 people? And we had to do succession planning. We had a whole business continuity plan that we looked at it for the first time because we didn't have to execute it. But again, the one thing that I will say that steadfastly got us through that very difficult phase was keeping the end in mind. Okay, whatever happens, we are all going to be okay. That was my faith that told me that. Second thing is, got to take care of the health, safety, and the economic well-being of our staff. That is really important. And we have to make sure that our customers are all taken care of, because they all do mission critical work and they put their faith in us every day when they award their contracts to us, and we have to take care of them. So
Mhm.
again, that whole, I think everything comes to a 360 at that point: your moral compass, your ethics, your integrity, your commitment to service, and your commitment to your stakeholders. So that got us through my own spiritual strength, that we got through that phase.
Amazing, amazing. It's truly amazing that I mean, this is just one example of how, all of us have faced challenges this last year. And I think there were challenges that people never even realized that you could face, because, human memory is short term. Nobody remembers 100 years back. Nobody remembers 50 years back. And it's pretty amazing. Let me turn it back over to you, Amita. What about you? What kind of stumbles have you faced, and how has your dharmic background helped you get through those, especially when you were starting your business?
Mm-hmm. So definitely, I faced some roadblocks as I started out. The cases that I was getting was, pretty standard and what I was trained to treat, and these were like skin diseases, digestive disorders, sleep disorders, metabolic disorders. But over time, the cases started to become more and more complex. So, for example, a chronic fatigue syndrome, where I've had people unable to stand for even 10 minutes. Several cases like that, and debilitating pain that was not healing with allopathy, autoimmune disorders, more and more of that. And I am now starting to get into a little bit of a panic mode as I first started out a few years ago, that how am I going to help people who they can barely function. And these are, I'm talking about women, mostly women, predominantly in their 40s. So they're otherwise healthy and their lab tests are very normal. So to figure this out, it put me into that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But I then focused back on the what led me to it, the dharmic path, which is that the knowledge ultimately is not coming from me. I'm placed here in a position to help these people, and the knowledge is coming from a higher source. Mm-hmm. And all I needed to do was to be very present with each of these people and to have infinite amount of compassion, and that transference of love and showing to these patients that there's somebody here who's going to listen and care. And I turned to the divine for that intuition, you know, on how to do it. And that's all I relied on. And I can't really explain how the success stories came, but they did. It was one healing story after another. And there's a verse in the Gita I recall, which is, those who set their hearts on me and worship me with unfailing devotion, they are most established in yoga. So if you think about this verse and contemplating upon it, I felt that, how can I worship you? How can I worship that? I worship that through the people, through the patients who were struggling. I felt that God is sending me that message, that this is the person I need to worship, and he is going to send me everything I need to do to help them.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, because what's important to understand is the definition of dharma is different for every person, and it's how you can internalize it and then kind of bring it to fruition in whichever path you have decided to take. And I think that's what the beauty is. You can define it for yourself, and that in what works for you.
The struggle there, I just wanted to make one more point, that the struggle there was in learning how to surrender ourselves and to put our egos to the side, you know, and to keep the bigger picture of what our purpose is in the work that we're doing. But once that surrender takes place, you know, the knowledge comes.
That's amazing. So I have a kind of a different question to put forth to both of you then. Have you at any point felt that, you know, your background from a dharmic community, or, you know, kind of your own family background and history has somehow hindered your professional growth as opposed to helping you? Because I think it's an important point for people to consider, because it almost becomes like a self-realization. So I'm going to put that out to both of you. Who would like to go first? Amita, would you like to continue, and then we switch back over to Dolly?
Yes.
I'll leave it to both of you.
Yes. Well, you know, there are the expectations that family has, and that was a challenge. You know, the business that our family business is in residential construction. We're a family of builders. My father, his brother, my two brothers were all in that field. So from the time I could walk, I was on the construction site with my dad, learning how to build homes. And working in the field, I was able to watch our business grow. We opened a new branch in Maryland. You know, my father's company was in Virginia, and we watched the success of the business and the growth of the business. But then there came a time where I again had to ask that, when is enough? You know, what is that point that you say, okay, I've earned enough, or I've contributed enough in this work, and I need to now follow the dharmic path. So that was a challenge. I had to, of course, almost seek permission from, you know, the husband first. So, and then my father. But I think the blessing was that my father, being highly spiritual himself, I mean, the Gita guided him in throughout his entire career, and he himself has been doing 100% of the funds he's earned from his work has been donated to his charity for the last 25 years. He's recently built a school for the deaf and the blind to board 400 poor children in Punjab in India. So this is the, the kind of family and thinking that I've grown up with. My husband equally a devout yogi with me. So that made it much easier.
That's very nice. Cool. Very cool. Dolly, what about you? Do you ever feel like your background and your dharmic background has somehow hindered you in your growth rather than help?
So I want to answer it in two different ways. One is society, what it expects of you as a woman, and a woman of a minority woman in a foreign country like the United States. That has its own opportunities and challenges at the same time. And similarly, your beliefs sometimes pull you in a different direction. So first of all, I want to say that I'm very fortunate that I have two other sisters, and as three girls, when the rest of society was offering condolences to my parents for having three daughters, my parents were celebrating that they have three daughters, because my father would say each daughter is worth more than 5,000 sons. So that was his famous line. And so our family really invested in all of us, invested in the sense that whatever we wanted to follow, they allowed us to, like I said, get up on a plane and come to the United States as a single woman, that itself. But at the same time, there are societal pressures, and I will say that, and I don't want to come across in a negative way, but when I came over here, I didn't understand certain things about myself and my background, but everybody else was perceiving me as a minority person, as a person who didn't speak English, probably wasn't educated. I was being perceived as that. And that created a lot of confusion in my mind. It wasn't until I got married to my husband, who is a Caucasian man, I said, why does everybody speak in Spanish? Why do they think I don't know English? He said, and he was so straightforward. He says, because you look Mexican. I was like, what? So I have to say that I had no idea that there was a certain expectation of a founder, a CEO, a person in defense and technology space. And so my background and my ethnicity came into being, but I never felt hindered, quite honestly. In fact, one of the Indian magazines interviewed me, India Abroad interviewed me and said, oh, it's so sad that you have all these hindrances. I said, no, it's great. I'm the only non-white person in a room. They remember me. I work really hard, so I hope that I'm well prepared and I say the right things most of the time. So I think it's a benefit. So I have to say that I have turned the hindrance into a benefit rather than, feeling sorry for myself. And I will say, I am expected, society expects you to be this great business person, wheeling and dealing and doing all that stuff. My family is not like that. Even though my dad was an entrepreneur, my mother was an entrepreneur of sorts also. And we were totally driven by the service first and money the second, which again becomes a hindrance sometimes, because you have to, in a for-profit company, you have to show profits. And I'm not saying that we don't, but my focus becomes too much on the customers and the service we provide and the solutions we provide. And sometimes I forget about the finances. And that has obviously carried through my life, because I always say then, don't follow money. Money will follow you if you do a great job. So I think that is sometimes an issue.
Well, thank you very much, Dolly. Amita and Dolly, we're coming up on our time, but I wanted to kind of have an open forum to just, what are your kind of last thoughts that you would like to leave the attendees with from your experiences?
Yeah, I could just say that that really worked for me, is to put aside my opinions on everything. I like this, I don't like this, I need this, I want this. And instead, just open your eyes and ears to what happens in your life, because those are the seeds that are being planted for a path that's leading you to your own higher purpose and what you're meant to do in the world and in the community. And all of us are here for that purpose. And it could be in anything, whether it's in gardening and landscaping or teaching or maybe even being home and nurturing our own families. But instead of trying to calculate what that is, just keeping your eyes open and seeing what the divine is putting in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dolly, any last thoughts you'd like to leave?
I agree completely. My philosophy is keep the windows of your mind open and let the air flow in, because you will get solutions. You have to keep faith, because the day we lose faith, then we lose everything. So lead with empathy, lead with lifting people around you, because that's one of the things we sometimes forget, that it's not about us, it's about who's around us and how do we lift everybody along and take them along with us. So if we can all do that and be more empathetic and caring of others around us, whether they are our co-workers or they are our friends or family, I think we would leave a better place.
Well, thank you both very much. And we hope to see both of you again at a future DhIA event, because I think both of you encapsulate what we want this foundation and this nonprofit to give back to the larger community, both here in the US and abroad. So we would definitely love to have you deeply engaged with the organization. But thank you for your time today. For those of you who are interested in staying connected with the panelists, feel free to share any questions or thoughts you might have through the chat, as well as the Q&A. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. In fact, now let us segue to the next panel, which is going to be discussing maintaining support systems, and which will be moderated by Dr. Aruna Nathan. Aruna?
Hi, Nitya. Thank you so much. That was just amazing, really wonderful. Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So today we have heard and learned some valuable life lessons from experiences of women who are truly experts in their fields. We have seen how Dharma has been an integral part, the matrix, if you will, for all the decisions they have made and continue to make. Dharma is the sustainer of our very being. Dharma holds us from within and connects us to every living being around us. We ourselves have experienced the same in our lives at different stages. More and more women around the world are given equal opportunities and thus have been fortunate to affect so many people around them. However, although we are making progress, issues continue to persist. Challenges and inequities that women continue to face on an ongoing basis is the reason we have assembled the next panel. The focus of this panel is to identify these inequities in women, professional and personal, review methods to address them that includes multidimensional wellness, professional and personal mentorship and support. I have the privilege to introduce this amazing panel of women: Sheila, Tu, Wangmo, Shiva, and Ophelia. I should invite them to turn on their cameras now. Okay. Sheila and Tu are both OBGYN physicians. They each have over 25 to 30 years of caring for women exclusively. And both of them, as you will see shortly, lead by example. They both practice what they prescribe to their patients. Wangmo, whose career has been devoted to understanding Dharma and promoting its practice, And both times I've heard Wangmo, I just wanted to close my eyes and just be. And I can't wait for you guys to hear her. Then we have Shiva, who currently serves as Executive Director of the LGBTQ and Women's Center at Georgetown University. Over her career, she has studied a broad range of diversity issues, including gender, race, faith, religion, sexual orientation, class, and disability, and has developed a specialized expertise in intergroup dialogue methods, including conflict resolution and mediation. And lastly, we have Ophelia, who has more than 30 years of experience leading research and consulting assignments for businesses, governments, universities, and nonprofit organizations around the world. Her recent work has focused on wellness industry, and she has co-authored numerous global wellness institute studies. So let's get started with the panel, and I will pass the mic on virtually to Sheila.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you so much. Thank you to the founders of DhIA for inviting me to this very unique conference. Indeed, privileged. Can I slide share, Aruna? So, yeah, so I'm going to talk about the holistic recognition of problem areas without guilt. I've been a gynecologist now for the last 25 years. And over the years, I've had the extreme privilege of dealing with generations of women delivering their babies and dealing with their primary healthcare concerns. And one of the common threads that I see running through most of these women's lives is their inability to focus on their own self-care. And there was this gap in their management where they were not able to really inculcate things like nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress management, and so on, and which was why I diversified to doing lifestyle medicine and fit consultancy so I could offer a more holistic approach to my patients. But very often when I advise them about their own self-care, there was this ability for, they didn't seem to think that could prioritize their time. Instead, what they were doing was focusing on either work, if they were working outside of home, or focusing on the needs of their immediate family if they were homemakers. So you see at two ends of the spectrum, women are either working outside of home or the homemakers. And all of them, most of them, the common thing that they all seem to have in spades is a whole lot of guilt about many things and many decisions that they were making in their lives and second guessing themselves. So they had guilt about just about everything, the long hours at work, being away from home. Sometimes they were guilty about not working outside of home, especially if they were already, had degrees and PhDs, but for whatever reason they couldn't work. They were guilty of neglecting their family. Some of not having children or not being able to have children. Successful made some guilty, not being successful, not spending enough time with parents, friends, family, spending money on yourself on themselves made them guilty. Not married made some women guilty. Taking care of one's own needs made some women guilty, or not taking care of one's own needs, eating too much or eating a certain diet, always in search of a new and better diet, getting divorced, anything and everything, and it was endless. So just for completion, guilt and shame are two different things. Guilt is an agitated, negative state in which the person feels anxious for perpetrating a wrongdoing and wishes to change the situation. Whereas shame, on the other hand, is a more dejected emotional state in which the person's entire sense of self-worth is under attack because of abject failures to present the self in a desirable light. So what is the reason that we feel so much guilt? It's not just that women are the only people, men feel guilt too. According to the research, men tend to feel more guilt, women tend to feel more shame. But there is a reason why a lot of women tend to experience guilt. And it is about the socialization that we are faced with right from the time we are very young children. And we've been told that we need to be there for everybody at all times, which is really not practical. This sense of needing to be there for everybody at all times makes us quite paralyzed with guilt, which means it does not enable us to make the right decisions for our own well-being. It makes us want to hide and withdraw. We've also been told that we need to be perfect, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, perfect spouse, and also the insidious message that we are never good enough. The combination can be quite disastrous. There is this misconception of gratitude by comparison, where you would tell somebody, for instance, be grateful that you have a stable family, the other woman doesn't, when what she really wants is to follow her career. And what this does is actually make her more guilty wanting to follow her career. This kind of learned helplessness that sets in because of this overwhelming guilt doesn't help, because what it does is really not just make you hide, but almost curl up and languish. I think also that we are often our own worst enemies, and often also see other women as our nemesis, because there is a lot of judgment and criticism and antagonism, and this is played out quite commonly in the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law situations, the mother-daughter narrative. Not to say that's the only sphere in which there is judgment and criticism. You see it at work: who has more success, who has a better car, who has a better marriage, who had a better holiday. It's on and on. And there is competition and a lot of comparison among women commonly. This fear of being judged is probably what prevents many women from actually reaching out and asking for help when they really need the help. So if we need to thrive instead of just survive, I think women need to come together to support and encourage each other. And where I see the most levels of happiness and sense of being is when such support systems exist in abundance. We need to be supportive, but also allow the other person to make her choices, possibly fail or succeed, whatever the situation, and let her handle it the way she can. Acceptance with no judgment, and the idea that you can express yourself authentically is something that I think we should allow not just ourselves, but other women to experience as well. So what can we do with this enormous amount of guilt that we've been burdened with? I think we start with ourselves. While we need the support of societies, we need the support system around, we want those nurturing relationships, we need to start with ourselves by learning to articulate guilt or fear or shame or whatever it is that we are experiencing and ask for help. And then accept help graciously. This is not easy to do. So being able to articulate it and asking and receiving needs to be done in a gracious manner. We need to stay mindful, which means that this is a situation as it is. It may be bad, it may be difficult, but this is where it is. And from here, we move forward in a positive manner. Start with self-compassion, which is, I find that it's very difficult, speaking even from personal experience. You're very compassionate towards other people, other women, but when it comes to the self, there is a lot of criticism. The next thing is to focus on what you can control. The things that we can control are really only our reactions and our response to the situation around us. So what can we control? The level of engagement that we have with the world, the focusing on our own well-being, focusing on our responses to the criticism around us. These are the things that we can control. We certainly can't control the expectations of those around us. So let's just stay with the focus of what we can control. Prioritizing nutrition, sleep, all parts of self-care, which the other panelists are going to talk about, is important, because all these things in sense of well-being, which is very important for us to actually stay positive even in difficult or difficult situations. Surround yourself with authentic relationships where you can be, you can ask for help and receive help, and disengage or walk away from relationships that are not really holding you in good stead and not really doing you too much good. I think the most important question to ask yourself is, how are you showing up for other women? How are you there to support their journey? Because it's not always about receiving, and it's not always about you asking for help. But if you can be of support, as many of the panelists who've been speaking so far have already articulated so beautifully, we need to ask ourselves, how are we there? How are we showing up to help other women in their journey? And finally, I think really all we can do is just do the best that we possibly can. Thank you. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Aruna, you're on mute.
You're muted, Aruna.
Still muted.
Sorry about that. I don't know where my brain is today. I'm not being as mindful as I should be, I guess. So thank you so much, Sheila. That was very comprehensive. Thanks for starting it off. We'll move on to Dr. Tu Tran.
Hi. Sheila talk was fantastic, and it's a great transition to my talk now about self-care. So I'm taking Sheila points and kind of tell you what I do in my daily life. Like Sheila, I am an OBGYN physician. I have been practicing in the Washington metropolitan area for 30 years. And like Sheila, I have met thousands and thousands of women who play so many different roles in their daily life and do not take time for self-care. They often feel burnout and unhappy. So over the last few decades of my practicing medicine, I watched the happier women and learned the little strategy from their life. And then I formed this step for me to keep me survive the complicated role of being a woman. So I'm going to run through these steps with you. And I really believe that if we have some organization with our time, I really believe that all of us can live this lifestyle, because like everyone else, my days have to be 24 hours a day. And I'm a full-time worker, a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, a friend. So I live this life, and I think all of us can. So the first step of self-care for me is exercise. I exercise probably anywhere from 5 to 7 to 8 hours a week. But the American Heart Association recommends minimally every week we should exercise moderately to intensively with aerobic activities about 2.5 hours. So literally just 150 minutes a week. If you want it to be more effective, you should exercise 5 hours a week. And I really believe that we deserve that time for ourselves, because it really helps us be physically fit and mentally happy. as we get older, as women, we have the risk of falling. So I strongly advise my patient to incorporate some activity that improve their balance and flexibility, such as yoga or Tai Chi. If we exercise well, we can accomplish the second task better. And the second task of self-care is sleep. If we are a woman who's older than 25, we need 7.5 to 8 hours at least a night. And if we are younger than 25, I would suggest 9 hours or more. And I tell my patient to try to sleep within our circadian zone, meaning, don't go to bed at 2 a.m. and try to catch up with your sleep by taking naps during the day, because if you do so, you can actually change the microbiome or the gut bacteria, which is a foundation of your immune system. So sleep is important. The third step that for self-care is nutrition. And I'm sure all of you here probably heard the kind of food that we should eat as a foundation of health. And that's the anti-inflammation kind of food, which is mostly plant-based. And I'm trying to be as much a vegetarian as I can. I'm not there yet, like my friend Aruna, but someday I might be a vegan. We'll see. The 4 step of self-care is meditation. I am practicing TM, or transcendental meditation, twice a day, first thing in the morning when I wake up, and first thing in the afternoon when I come home. I really treasure that time. I do believe that we need that time to center ourselves, to find our inner self, and to recognize who we really are. Because a lot of time you plan into the world and you forget who you are. And when you meditate, it's a time to reflect on who we are. And meditation can be yoga activity. It can be yoga breathing. I tell my patient it can be a meditative focused walk in the woods. That's mindfulness activity too. Social connection, to me, as we get older, is one of the most important self-care need. Ophelia will give you a fantastic talk on the holistic side of relationship, because like her, I do believe that the meaningful friendship with our friends, our families, our colleagues should be, beyond financial gain. And so I'll let her talk about that. As far as my social connection activity, I belong to a monthly book club. Every Saturday, I participate in a weight training boot camp with a group of friends. Every Sunday morning, I walk on the C&O Canal with another group of friends, followed by coffee time. And then we end our week in the beginning of the next week in the evening with 1 hour of yoga. And during the pandemic, it has been hard. We see each other mostly on Zoom, and we have resumed our canal walk just 2 or 3 weeks ago. The last thing that I want to talk about that Sheila spoke very well is the concept of self acceptance, because that's the one thing I noticed in so many thousand women that I have met over the years. We are so hard on ourselves. We do not seem to recognize that a more normal being is actually the one with flaws and imperfection, and that's okay. We need to learn to live our life. We need to learn to follow our path, as the previous panelists spoke really, really well. We need to follow our path for happiness. We need to be kind to ourselves while we are trying to be our best self. So, we just need to stop comparing ourselves to the Mrs. Jones next door. And this is to end my talk. I show you the photo that I took with my cell phone last Sunday when I took a walk with my friend on the Seminole Canal. That was Virginia bluebells that have been in full bloom for the last few weeks. And when I look at the picture, I really think that it symbolizes the relationship between women. If you look at every flower, each one of us is beautiful in our own way. But if we stand together, like this cluster of bluebells, I think we would be even more striking, and we can, withhold from the storm better when we stand as a group of sisters. And so on that note, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. And I'm turning my attention back to my good friend Aruna.
Tu, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And, you should also mention that you were one of the founding members of Lady Doc's Corner Cafe, which started off as just, 6 people exercising in the basement, and now has about 160, healthcare professionals, and we meet often, and we have good social connections that way.
And we exchange at least like 100 emails a day. I know my inbox is unbelievable every day on different subjects.
Yeah, and so you're taking care of yourself, and that's not being selfish. Self-care is not selfish. You're being present that way for others, and the social connection. And we are moving on now to Wang Mo, who is going to bring the spiritual connection. Go ahead, Wang Mo.
I'm delighted to be here with all of you. It's really been an honor to hear from these great ladies in so many different professional backgrounds as well as spiritual backgrounds. And I am the director of Dharma College, which is based in Berkeley, California. And I grew up in a Buddhist family. My father is a Tibetan Lama. So Dharma has been with me from my very early years. And as a middle-aged lady, I see that Dharma is playing a much more prominent place in my life. And so today I would like to share with you a gift of just reconnecting to stillness. And just as a gift, a birthright that each of us have to reconnect to this place that maybe can open up into Dharma. So we'll just take a little journey into stillness. For just a minute, I'm going to ring this bell, and I'm just going to ask you to take your seat, your lotus seat, and to begin to pay attention to our breath, our natural breath, which exists with us at all times, even until the last breath, so that we can really begin to be in touch with our breath and in our body. And so just relaxing and easing into this still space. And I'm going to ring the bell now for just 1 minute. Wonderful. That has been just 1 minute. And I would ask each of you in this forum if you can take just 5 minutes of your day. Many of the women have already shared that they have a dharmic practice. I find that this is very important to bring into your life as a way to start the day to connect to that space of silence, to connect to any point that arises in your being. The place that you see as a fixed point, to go beyond that and to release any fixation that we might have to that point, to release it and let go. Another way to bring in meditation is to also become part of the meditation practice itself by walking. We heard from Tutran, Dr. Tutran, that she likes to walk. So we can actually apply a mindful practice as we walk as part of our wellness exercise, but just to really get a deeper sense and connection to that inner stillness that allows us to see clearly, allows us to understand and connect to our Dharma. So we observe our thoughts as really a place of entry. We become more attuned to how thoughts are arising, becoming more in touch with this internal space that perpetuates our day-to-day activities, so that we're really paying attention to what is arising. We're not just chasing after and doing, getting lost or getting entangled, or maybe even distracted, but really pulling us back into the space of stillness so that we can begin to observe clearly and walk on the path of Dharma. Just like this young lady, she's just beginning to set herself in motion for being in a mindful practice. I'd like to leave with you that within this immediate moment of experience, there's nothing that you can say or label. There's nothing tangible to put into words or concepts. Experience is not even there. What you may discover is that the experience dissolves and that all the problems with it, and this becomes a meditation. So I like to use the example of sky as maybe a meditation object that's with us all the time, just remembering how the sky, this infinite space that we can connect with, is a reflection of our inner space, that infinite way to connect to stillness. So I would encourage you as part of Dharma to bring in a meditation practice and for you to connect to your personal stillness and let that journey take you in to a very nourishing place in your life that provides so many treasures for you to understand and to become more in touch with. So we're really reconnecting to this bountiful amount of treasures that lie within each of us. And that is our extraordinary potential of being that we have seen in all that you are doing, in all that you are manifesting, this extraordinary potential, this beautiful quality that exists that we've seen with all of the speakers. So thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this. And I look forward to hearing how the rest of the panelists share.
Thank you so much, Wang Mo. That was beautiful. As women, we frequently search for meaning and purpose in our lives beyond the practical and mundane. So the next speaker is Shiva, and the inequalities faced by women and their families who identify as LGBTQ remains largely invisible. The trauma of facing ignorance, discrimination, harsh words, and marginalizations add to other existing inequalities that women in general face. Awareness of available resources combined with commitment to action and equity is essential for LGBTQ women of Dharma. So with that, I welcome Shiva.
Thank you for having me here. And oh, did the screen share stop? Let me try again. Aruna, would you be able to share the share? Because mine kicked me out for some reason. I'm so sorry. While we're waiting, let me just say that, thank you to all the panelists. Thanks for DhIA to organize this. And I'm really excited to be here. My own work has been predominantly with lesbian, bisexual, trans, and queer women. And, when it comes to women and it comes to Dharma, the one thing that I want to emphasize is it's all plural, right? We don't really have a single version of being a woman or single version of the dharmas. And I think we often tend to forget that this plurality makes a big difference to us. So one of the things that I want to talk about here is, our realtors have this term, right? Location, location, location. Can you go to the next slide, Aruna? So I will use the term context, context, context. Who are we talking about here, And the context for me is at least two specific things. One is the geographic location. Where are we here? Are you in the US? Whether you're in the subcontinent, in the diaspora? And the second is the social systems of which we are all a part. Whether we are part of the systems in terms of the diversity from religion, caste, region, linguistics, socioeconomic status, all of that makes a difference to how we experience gender and sexuality. And I think that's the one thing that I want us to really, really think about, that when we are talking about women, when we are talking about support systems, we have to take into account that there is not one solution that fits everyone. And this plurality is very, very important to keep in mind. And particularly when it comes to experiencing gender and sexuality, we cannot separate it from these diversities. So the other piece that I will say is, our dharmic traditions, there is a sort of an ideal up there. And, supposedly we have 28 different genders and sexualities that the ancient systems recognized, but that's not the world we live in. And the cultures and families we live in are very much binary and often are lived and embodied realities are very different. And I would like us to think about that and invite the audience to think about that. So when we think, the next slide, please. So one of the biggest impacts, I think, of all of this is isolation, alienation, alienation from self and isolation from family and community and by extension, the larger world, right? And we all know that the impacts of this on mental health and wellness, all of that has been talked about by the previous panelists a great deal. But in this particular case, there is a lot of internalized homophobia and conflict. And I want to make this one suggestion, which may come across as a little provocative, and that is that particularly for this community, family is the site of exclusion and discrimination. And I would invite us to think through this a little bit, that it is the family and by extension, therefore, are the communities that becomes the site of our sense of exclusion and discrimination. And so what happens is when it comes to professional choices, which we've heard about brilliantly earlier on, many times we are pushed into certain professions. And I think for LGBTQ people particularly, this can become very challenging, although professional spaces can sometimes be spaces of freedom for us because families are not. Next slide. So one of the things, so why do I say queer ragas? I think I'm asking or inviting us to have a more intersectional approach and understanding to LGBTQ identities. And when it comes to supporting us, I think the most important thing I can leave us with is that the emphasis on this has always been on coming out. But I really think the importance is about the coming together of all of who we are, who we can be, and who we can become. That it is the coming together that is the most important. And I think the mystery that I have there about the they is the kind of stuff that family uses against us, right? Like, what will they say? What will they think? And that internalized sense of lack of wholeness is what prevents us from being full people. So I'm going to leave you on the last slide with some resources for us. And these will be on the website, I am told. I'm also happy to take questions. I can be reached also directly at that email. But thank you again.
Shiva, thank you so much. We will be sharing the resources in the chat as well, and it will be available on the website as well. And we move on now to Ophelia Young.
Hi. Well, I'm so glad to be in the company of all these amazing speakers, ladies, today. So I'm asked to sort of sum up this panel, and which we're talking about connections and networks. So honestly, when I was first asked to talk about this topic, I had a little bit of resistance because, like many of you, I don't like to ask people for anything, including help, and also to approach someone with some kind of agenda that I'm going to gain something from it. It is not a kind of a pleasant or a kind of pleasant feeling for me. But instead, when we think about connections as connecting internally, your mind, body, and spirit, but also extending this connection to outside, to people, to the world and the planet, to everything around us. This is a more meaningful connection when I think about it. And then to look at support networks, not as like networking, but more like a sisterhood, or what my Gen Z daughter would say, my mom's squad. Then I know I have something that I can share. Once I listened to a lecture by an author of a book called 100-Year Life. And the author talked about, because of science, scientific and medical advances, lifespan has increased, and possibly to 100 years for a baby's born today. So what do we do with this long life? And a lot of us would be chasing, what the world considered important, like money, power, status. And it is true that if you achieve your dream of becoming a billionaire, you can possibly buy a Greek island, private jets, and even new friends. But when you are 100 years old, or even maybe you're my age, 55, and you ask yourself what you've achieved, and you ask yourself this question: do you have friends that you have known for 50 years, for 45 years, like me, 55? Do I have friends who are my friends for the last 40 years? It is not something you can buy when you have achieved everything else. So what we're talking about here is meaningful relationships, long, deep relationships, and that will accompany us on our journey in life when we're seeking meaning, purpose, and joy, that we cannot walk alone. So we're talking about these friendships. This is a kind of support network. And not only the kind of maybe emotional or spiritual support that we think about in the life of Dharma, but these are the people who can be our friends and companions when we want to live a life of self-care, of taking care of us, and of wellness, like all the things that Dr. Tran mentioned. When we go exercise, practice yoga, meditation, and we want to go shop and cook and eat healthy foods. Do we have those friends? Those are the friends that we want to walk this life with. And those are people we laugh with and grow old with, right? So we look around us, these possibilities are everywhere. They could be the relationships in our family, school and work, our neighbors and our communities. And these are the people you could be, with whom you could be your authentic self. And so, how do you build this network? Some of you may have heard of this book, which was published 85 years ago by Dale Carnegie, called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it is widely touted as the first self-help book in the Western world. So, how to win friends, become popular, and building a network is sometimes seen as something you need a strategy. How do you go about doing it? But instead of a strategy, I think it's more important that what we should aim for is a quality and an attitude of how you see possibilities in the people you meet every day, and to cultivate and develop meaningful connections with them. So what are some of these qualities? Well, maybe we start with the ones we want to avoid. For example, we are all drawn to people we admire when we think about support network, people we think had something that can teach us. And in these relationships, it's really important to avoid harmful qualities like envy, like what Dr. Nambia talked about, comparing yourself to others and then inviting judgment. And why am I not like them? And they're so, successful and they live this life. And so and those are the kind of qualities in a relationship that will make us feel inadequate, that is actually not going to help us. And eventually it's not going to be our support network. And the work networking also often implies that we have an agenda. What can I gain from this person or this relationship? And I resist this kind of thinking, because you are not approaching something with a pure intent. And also this kind of intention and attitude can really limit the possibilities and what you can see in any connection. So what I think is, if you approach people with openness and curiosity, you're going to find connections and support coming from the most unlikely places. Take work, for example, and it is often a place we are encouraged to hide behind some kind of a facade. We want to conform, look professional, look like we have it all together, businesslike. But bringing your true self and all your values and vulnerabilities is a foundation of building trust and to really connect with people. When I retired a few years ago, my colleagues made a slideshow in my retirement party of all the projects that I have done and the places we've traveled to, all the things we've done over 25 years of my consulting life. And when your career is summarized like that, and all your projects and all your accomplishments, they actually, to me, add up to some insignificant bullet points. It's not really that meaningful when you look at it after 25 years. And instead, what touched me the most was when people told me what I meant to them as a mentor, as a friend of work, even as a boss, where I have touched their lives, helped them grow, or as a source of advice or support in a difficult time, professionally or personally. So what I learned is that we approach each connection with openness, with honesty and curiosity, and with the spirit of, can I listen better? Where can I help? And where I can make an impact, including for those people who may not be like us, like Shiva said, our LGBTQ sisters, and people who have no voice. They need our understanding and our support too. So I want to touch upon the idea of giving and receiving, which is complicated, because often women do so much for others, but it is from a position of duty, of guilt, of habit, sacrifice, and even to the point of bringing a martyr mentality. I'm a martyr. And so when we give this way and when we receive back, it's almost like a transaction. We're expecting to receive back what we give. And I think we need to think of both giving and receiving as requiring an equal amount of grace, because the line between giving and receiving is not always clear. When we are receiving help, we might be giving, and when we are giving help, we could be receiving at the same time. So we don't have to worry so much about reciprocating, because the universe has a way of balancing everything for us. So I think I'll stop here. I think we are over time in this panel. And I'm going to return back to Aruna.
Ophelia, thank you so much. I'm so fortunate to walk with you every Monday and have these discussions. But I just want to thank you again. What we saw in the panel today, we started off with Dr. Nambiar, Sheila, who spoke about how as women, we need to identify these inequities, not necessarily think of them as deficiencies, and then think about it and also verbalize it, because we realize when we talk about it is that many other people around us may have the same issues, if you may. And then we heard from Dr. Tran about how we should take care of ourselves. We learned that self-care is not being selfish. If you take good care of your mental health, your physical health, your mind, your emotions, you will be better present, for yourself and for others. We learned about being connected within ourselves, being connected to the world within us, to take that time in a day, maybe even just 5 minutes, to sit down and connect with ourselves. And there's so much within us that we can listen to, and then with that connect with the outside. And I love the picture that Dr. Tran had with all the flowers, and how we can all be so different, like Shiva pointed out. You said there are 28 different genders, and I think that's so beautiful to recognize. And together, all of us, are as beautiful as that bunch of the Virginia bluebells that you shared. So thank you. And now I will be passing on the mic to the president of DhIA, Mr. Shekhar Narasimhan. And yeah, thank you.
Aruna, thank you so much for a terrific job. You have managed to sort of summarize something really, really, really deep and powerful. I would invite Sonal to turn on her video and her microphone, and there she is. Sonal, we are bookending this conference. For DhIA, it's our launch. It's a critically important moment in our society. We're bringing things together, and particularly highlighting the role of women has become so critical. Let me introduce you and then let you speak to what you've heard and what you're thinking. Sonal has broken more glass ceilings than there were glass ceilings, okay? So I'm just going to mention only 5 things very, very briefly. Number one, she's a technologist who worked at Google. She started IndyCore to connect way back 25 years ago, young second generation Indian Americans in the US to their roots in India, recognizing that they didn't want to be dragged around with their parents to eat bad food and go to see people they didn't ever meet again. She started and was the first Asian American to be at the senior levels of a transition team in a presidential transition for Barack Obama in 2008. She ran the first ever office for social impact and innovation at the White House. She then started Beak Center for Social Innovation and Social Impact at the Georgetown University, and that was the first director. And then, she left it only temporarily to become the policy director for the Pete Buttigieg campaign. Policy director, I might add. Not very many Asian Americans have ever achieved that status. And finally, so she doesn't get bored and doesn't keep us hanging, she is now the president of a newly formed substantial foundation called the Asian American Foundation. So listen, my friend, a person who honors us with her presence, Sonal Shah.
Shekhar, thank you so much. And more importantly, your friendship over the years has been just incredible. I mean, I think we got to know each other in the Obama campaign. And since then, I just feel like we've known each other forever. So it's one of those relationships that you feel like you've already known them your whole lifetime. And it's only been 10 years. or 14 years. I just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for DhIA. It's been fascinating listening to every panel today. And honestly, I wish when I was growing up, I had listened to all of these women as I was growing up, because there's so much experience, so much wisdom, so much risk that each one of you have taken in your lives. And that risk is something that I think we as women just absorb it and don't think about it. But I think what we forget is that, the barriers that each of you has broken, it's not just about going and working in government, it's having that risk to start a business. It's being LGBTQ when it's really hard and no one wants to believe in you. It's making sure that you're changing your lifestyle so you can take care of your kids. All of those things are things that we have all done, but we just absorb as part of life. And I think it's important to recognize how much women have done over the years, especially in the way we approach our Dharma. We're not yelling and screaming from the bridges and mountaintops and saying, hey, we've done all this. We sort of do it because it's the right thing to do. And that, to me, and just listening to each and every one of these women has been incredible. I mean, I think we have so much to offer, but I think we also have to pave the path. It's not just doing it because it's the right thing, but it's also blazing the trail and bringing other people and telling them this is how you can do it. Here, we're going to back you up. We're going to be a part, and we're all not always going to agree on everything. That's okay. Like, none of us have ever agreed on anything in life. But if we do it together, if we leave a path, if we leave the ability for people to blaze their own trails, the next generation gets another chance. And then the generation after that gets another chance. So, after having listened to each and every one of you and feeling such tremendous pride and wishing I had known each of you as I was growing up, I could have called you for advice of how do I do this or how do I think about this. I also want to say, I think we have a responsibility moving forward to say, how do we create the next path for this next generation that can carry on, do much more than I think I can even conceive of in my lifetime, and making sure that we're bringing them along. Even if we agree or disagree, it's not the point. The fact is, women have that capacity and the Dharma in them to do what is right, and we should allow others to do the same, what is right for them, what is right for their beings, whoever we each are. So I am so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful, Shekhar, to be talking to you. This is like the best part of my day, because it's actually the funnest part of my day. But I really loved starting today, listening to each and every one of you.
Sonal, thank you. Now, tell me, this hasn't been a path with a bed of roses. So I recall something that happened within our community, and we talk about community a lot and support. What has hurt you the most in the risks that you've taken? What have you felt like passionately negative about that you've overcome?
Yeah, Shekhar, it's a great question. I mean, there's so many. I'm gonna just start with just even the fact that I went into public service as an Indian American woman, right? The community around you decides that you are, you should go become a lawyer, you should be a doctor, you should, go into business. There's lots of things that people believe, but going into public service, into government was sort of like, why would anybody do that? Those politicians are dirty people. Why would you want to be a part of that? So that was sort of risk one, right? And pieces. The second part is I'm not married and I don't have kids, right? In our community, we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to deal with someone who made a choice that they didn't want to get married, that they didn't want to have kids. And that is a personal decision. It was a decision, but it was a clarity of a decision for me. And I knew that decision when I was making it. So I think as a community, I think people accept it now, but I think it's still sort of like, what's wrong with her? Why didn't she get married, right? And then the third was actually a political decision. And when I got on the transition team for President Obama, and Shekhar, you were a part of helping me with all of this, the community, and there's a part of, we're a very large community. Let me just start with that honestly, right? But there was a concerted effort to get me off of that transition team. And it wasn't coming from the white community. It was actually coming from the Indian community. A group of professors, a group of people, because of what I might have done when I was a kid, not knowing all of the things I needed to know, because my parents, had associations, but because of that, a group of people decided it was okay to get me off the transition team. And that was the concerted effort that everybody's going to make. And to give you a sense of how strong that effort was, I was the 5th most searched person on Google in 2008. That is not an easy thing to do. On the other side, and I just want to be honest, there were also many members of the community like yourselves and like yourself and others who came and said, what do you need and how can we be helpful to you? What do you need for us to do? How do we help you? What do you need us to do? What can we do? but we're not kind to each other all the time. You know, we talk about Dharma as a society. We talk about Dharma as this is our religion. We believe in it. I've been taught my whole life, read the Ramayana, read the Mahabharata, all of that stuff I read. And then when it comes to support, the first time an Indian American woman ever has been in that position, the first thing we choose to do is to bring her down. So I was very hurt. I mean, I'll be honest, I was very hurt by the community. I was very hurt because all I felt like I had done was do public service, and I cared about doing good. And it took me 2 years to 3 years to work through my own personal anger and frustration to get there. So I think this is super important, that if we may disagree politically with people, but to bring someone down, that is a concerted effort of hate. And that is not a concerted effort of goodness. It's not about Dharma. It's not about anything. When you don't like someone politically, have an argument politically. There's nothing wrong. Politics is politics. Religion is religion. We can disagree. But hate is personal, and it affects your being.
Well, that leads me to my last question because of where we are today as a society. And I know we should be concerned about, you know, many things across the world, you know, including the COVID-19 crisis in India and so on. But we have seen this fairly dramatic spike in anti-Asian hate, just really in the last 18 months. Lots of reasons for it, and one of them could easily be hate speech and fear-mongering and all of that. But initially, a lot of people who are brown didn't associate with it. They saw it as sort of, you know, it's kind of an East Asian issue. But very quickly, as you realize, Thais and Indonesians and even Assamese and Burmese realized they could be easily mistaken. And then the next thing you know, there's a hate, what I truly believe was a hate crime in Indianapolis against Sikhs. So you have Korean American women and Sikhs, and all of a sudden, for the first time, we're talking about this is an anti-Asian problem. It's not a question of are you brown, are you Sikh, are you Hindu, are you Jain, are you Buddhist? The question is, how do we actually start to think about this Sonal together? So we don't always other the other and not feel equally supportive and collaborative when these kinds of things happen.
Yeah, Shekhar, this is such an important conversation. And I think we as a community and sense of communities and Asian Americans also need to have this conversation. Othering other people and saying you're not like me or you're somebody else or that's happening to you. By the way, that's been happening in history for a long time, including in the United States. I remember in 9/11 when people were like, oh, they called you this, when you're like, well, I'm Indian, I'm not this. Like, that's not an answer to hate, right? It's not happening to me, therefore it's not happening to someone else, right? It is that when somebody else is being hurt, it is in our Dharma, if we want to believe in Dharma, to also stand up for them and be willing to stand next to them, stand behind them, or sometimes stand in front of them to make sure we are protecting them. If somebody is we are good people, our job is to take care of others. And our job is to do good by others, not how well we are successfully, not how great we made, you know, our names and all of that stuff. At the end of the day, the only person we get to report to is ourselves. And that point, when we report to ourselves, their Dharma is, when the moment was put in front of me, was I there for them? Did I actually do the right thing? So yes, it is the East Asian community that is getting a brunt of the hate. But next time, what we just saw with the Sikh community in Minnesota, the Sikh community's had it twice. The Oak Creek massacre in Wisconsin, and then most recently they were targeted because they were Sikh. So we need to stand up for our communities. We need to stand up for each other. We need to stand up for other communities, because when our time comes, we want them to be standing with us. And if we do not do that, we do not get better. We cannot talk about Dharma and not talk about how we stand up for each other.
All I can say is I appreciate your leadership. Thank you for appearing on this platform. You and I could talk for an hour about some of these things with a lot of people in the room. But I do want to say, particularly to the women on the board of the DhIA Foundation, Nirupama Raghavan, Nithya Nagarajan, and Aparna Ramaswamy who pulled this off. And I know I'm going to transition here in a second to Nithya. So Nithya, I'm going to transition to you and to let you close this out. And I know you're going to have an open mic after that. Sonal, thank you for all you do. Thank you for your friendship. And please continue the leadership and know that we are standing with you and behind you.
Shekhar, thank you so much. And again, thank you for this fantastic conference. I really, really appreciated this.
Nithya, it's your turn to close this.
Thank you, Shekhar, and thank you, Sonal. That was a wonderful kind of the bookend to this conference. And I also want to thank everyone who's joining this inaugural event, focusing on the life paths and choices for women. It's been amazing hearing how Dharma has impacted the lives of so many different women, and as well as how it shaped their careers and life choices. It's definitely food for thought on how some of the lessons learned can apply to our own lives. And on behalf of DhIA, I want to personally thank all of the panelists, moderators, and speakers. I feel that this conference should leave us all feeling inspired. And it's also important to note that this is just the first in a series of events that we hope to present in 2021 as well as beyond. And we want everyone who attended today to stay engaged, to help promote goodness in the world for others by emphasizing the Dharmic principles of honesty, nonviolence, compassion, and equity. We hope this event has piqued your interest in DhIA, and we encourage you to stay engaged by becoming a member and to also volunteer for future events. I'd like to give a special thanks to Kasi, Isola, and Shalini Shetty, our tech and social media team, for all their hard work on this event. Several of our panelists and board members will stay on for a Q&A session, and we'll be happy to answer any and all questions you may have about DhIA or specifically the event today. For everyone else, thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend.
And if those panelists who are present, please go ahead and turn on your camera and microphone so we can all be visible once again. Thank you again. As we're hearing people talk, again, this is being live streamed, and it'll also be posted on our YouTube. The recording will be posted, so you will be able to access it. So I just want to take a minute to just respond to many of the speakers who we've met and Nithya has thanked. It's incredible the guidance that you've given us, sharing your stories, inspiring us on what we can do more. And again, Sonal's fantastic speech. You have to walk the talk. You can't just say things and say Dharma is this, that, and the other, but you got to follow it with action. So very inspiring to be with all of you again. So thank you, each of you. And as we go through, and I will moderate if there are any chat or questions that come up, we can bring that in, but feel free to converse amongst yourselves too.
So to me, the very interesting thing about this whole conference is just the different ways in which people interpret Dharma and the many different ways in which they apply it. And, the support system, I felt like that was, that panel was designed for me because I'm really one of the worst people about self-care. Nithya and Aparna can testify to this because my availability was very low as we were planning this conference. In the past 2 months, I've worked 80-hour weeks for about 4 or 5 weeks out of the past 2 months. And I'm not even exaggerating. And so, I think there's a lot of pressure on women to achieve and be role models for high levels of achievement. And I can't say what pressures men feel, but for me, I certainly feel like because I'm one of the few women in my field, or when I'm one of the more senior women, I have to achieve more, I have to do more, I have to prove myself more. And that comes at the expense of self-care. So it was a really good reminder of the simple things I can and should be doing. And I don't remember off the top of my head who said it, but self-care is not selfish. That's something I need to ingrain in my own head.
Hey, Nirupama, this is Aruna. I'm glad you pointed that out, about the self-care is not selfish. I think one of the ways to motivate yourself or the others around you to to do something like self-care is think of it like you're doing it for somebody else. So when we do a task or we are doing something for somebody else, we take it upon ourselves to do it. It could be for your child, it could be for anybody else. But so think of it as though you're taking care of yourself for a reason, for your children, for the people you work with, for your spouse. And then we tend to do it for sure a lot more.
You're so right. That is exactly right.
Yeah, this is Nitya here. I'd like to add something. And one of the things that Dolly said on the entrepreneurship panel is really important, because you don't realize, and this echoes something that Sonal said as well, which is that being from an Indian background, you're one of the only people I'm a trade attorney. I'm a partner at a fairly large law firm. When I enter a room, I'm still probably the shortest person in the room, probably the only person of Indian origin, and I'm still surrounded by white males. I even have very few females in my field. So it's still a very kind of eye-opening experience. And what Dolly said, we can use that to our advantage, because I'm probably remembered more than but it still holds me back. And that's one of the things you keep going back to. It's like, okay, how can I make this work for me? How do I keep true to myself? How do I practice the principles I'm supposed to learn, but still make a difference? And I think that was important. And it came out in both Dolly and Sonal's statements.